How do you make more money when you don't like making money? What do I say to people? The first thing, most of us don't do things that we don't like and don't want to do. So if you're like, you know what? Part of me wants to make money, and part of me thinks that everyone who makes money is an evil rat bastard. There's always going to be some struggle in there. And I think just acknowledging that and saying that is helpful because it can help us with some of the self-judgment that comes in. I work with a lot of activists, movement people, queer folks, people who work cooperatives, democratic workplaces, just the best art weirdos. I come out of activist and queer organizing cultures and communities, and there's a lot of really well-earned distaste and distrust about certain things that money represents and how it's used inequitably and unfairly and all the things that we know. And when it comes time for us to be like, I think I need some more money, if what we carry with us is the belief that there's no way to make money ethically, or anyone who makes money is a rat bastard, it's going to be harder than it might otherwise. I'm not saying you have to shift your mindset to worship money, but what I am saying is that it's hard to do things that we judge. And it's hard to do things that we are suspicious of for good reason, right? And I spend a lot of time with people investigating what's underneath some of these questions and investigating this in terms of thinking about, do I want my best friend or my partner or my nibbling to be resourced to have something they want to be able to do, pay to go to school, take care of their health and wellness in the ways that they see most fit, fill in the blank, right? Often the answer becomes like, yeah, of course I want my best friend or my partner or my nibbling to have these things. And so then we have to start getting into this nice murky gray area where money could actually help us do some good stuff, which is different than saying this is a wonderful system of capitalism. No, you do not have to say that. But it's also true that money helps us resource getting things done. It can allow us to do things for ourselves, for others. So when we're asking ourselves, I think I need to make more money, one little piece that's really helpful, you don't have to, but one piece that's helpful is to be like, what if money isn't the worst possible part of this? What if money is the tool and the resource that's going to facilitate this thing I'm trying to do, right? We start to loosen some of the hard, well-earned hard feelings that a lot of us can have about money. So that's one piece. When we want to make more money, it's a lot harder if you're like, but I hate money. And then when people say, I want to make more money, I'm getting okay with it, I'm working on it, the next thing I start to ask them is, well, how much more money do you want to make? It's really different to say, I want to make more money versus I want to have $1,000 more a month. It's really different. One is tactical and one is more like squishy and aspirational. It's okay to be squishy and aspirational, but it's harder to figure out the steps towards a squishy and aspirational thing. So if you're thinking to yourself, I want to make more money, I would deeply encourage you to put a number in your mind, even if that number is like a best guesstimate, or you just pick from your gut, because our brains are these beautiful narrative machines. And when we give the narrative more detail, we can start to make plans around it. Number three, I want to make more money. I would say specifically for what? Like, how specific can you get? And I want to name, it can be really challenging to do this kind of specific imagination work when we have experienced marginalization or living with limited resources. And I still am going to invite us to attempt to do some of it as specific as we can. For what specifically do you want money? Seriously, y'all, I coach people on money every week. This is something that we spend a lot of time with and need to slow down with. So I encourage you to be slow and kind and gentle with yourself when you're trying to get these specifics, because what we're really doing is we're saying, what needs have I not yet met? What dreams do I want to be able to make real? What is actually important to me that maybe feels out of reach right now? That's the question we're asking when we're saying, to what ends or why do I want to make more money? And I'll just give a couple examples so I'm not being theoretical, but that could be getting pregnant, having a commitment ceremony with a partner, going to get more education, buying a home, right? It could be some of these bigger, chunkier life goals, but it could also be, I want to get acupuncture every month, or I want to send my spouse to get a massage because she needs more massages. It could be, I want to be able to go to the local collectively owned queer feminist bookstore and buy 2 books every time I go, right? I want to be able to support my friend's business and buy from them, on and on. These are just a couple examples. Hopefully you can imagine that the list for you is going to be specific and custom to you and your family and your communities and what's important to you and what you need. But how do I make more money? We start to think about, what do I want to make more money for? And then the last little practical, tactical piece is, on what timeline? There are some things that we want more money for that are just, when I get there, I'm there. There are some things that are really time bound. I want to start a program that starts in October and I need 2 grand to put down my deposit. That's the whole story right there. How much for what, on what timeline? Because it is easier to say, I need to figure out getting 2 grand by October because I want to start this program, as opposed to, I need more money. Do y'all feel the difference? Because our little tactical smart brains can start to work with, I need 2 grand by October for this program. We have the why, our motivation, we have the what, how much, and our timeline. And we can start making action plans and trying things. I'd like to tell this story how in 20, oh God, a while ago, I started saving up for a motorcycle. I really wanted a motorcycle. I didn't have a timeline. I was just like, when I get there, I'm there. And I was living on maybe 30 grand a year in Brooklyn, and it was tight. But I really wanted a motorcycle. I was like, I first off, I could just deny that I want this and never figure it out. But what changes if I challenge myself to say, this is figure outable? I can meet this desire that I have. And so I just did the old fashioned $20 a week in an envelope method. And I knew I was going to end up buying the freaking thing on Craigslist. And eventually it took 3 years. But when I got there, and then I took my little envelope of 20s and met some random and bought their Honda Rebel from them. It was small enough to be achievable. I was motivated to keep making it happen. And that was a method that worked for me, that felt like it could meet where I was with how I was making money at that time. If I'd wanted to do it faster, if I'd had a timeline, I wanted to ride to Baltimore to see some friends, I might have taken a different approach. How much money, for what specifically, on what timeline? These are our tools when we're trying to figure out how to make more money. Sometimes we're making money towards goals that end: buy a motorcycle, right? Put a deposit for a program. Sometimes we're trying to make more money because life is just more expensive than it was last year. And last year it was more expensive than it was the year before, etc. We're trying to make more substantive, ongoing shifts in our overall earning. It's still really useful to say, what's the difference of what I'm earning today versus what I really think would be more supportive for me? It's still really useful to say, for what? I want to be able to spend $200 a week on groceries instead of 125. Getting specific really helps us. So what I'm saying about how do you make more money is that there's certainly many different ways to figure it out. What I'm pulling in here is, first, we have to not secretly not want to make more money on some level. Again, that just makes it harder. It's still doable. People do it, but it is harder. And then when we figure out for what, our tactical, practical brains start to come in. I want to give an example. I work with a lot of small business owners who are one-on-one service providers, therapists, acupuncturists, coaches. And hypothetical. This is no one actual person, but this is a common version of what I hear. It's all right, I'm seeing 20 clients a week and every client pays me $100. And so I'm able to make $2,000 a week. And I have my business expenses and I have to save for taxes. So I have maybe, I'm just making the math easy, $1,000 a week to pay myself after all this other stuff was getting paid for, my studio rent, et cetera, et cetera. And we kind of work together to figure that out. And then we can look at the numbers and say, okay, it looks like you're able to pay yourself about $4,000 a month, $1,000 a week. What's not getting covered in that $4,000 a month? Where's the gap? They might say, really want to save up to go traveling with my best friend. We can start to get specific. When are you going to travel? Where are you going to go? Hypothetical person is like, yeah, I really want to be able to go to Mexico City and Oaxaca. I want to go for 2 weeks. I want to be able to stay places. We can estimate that maybe they need to save $3,000 for this big magical special trip. Okay, great. When do you want to go? In 6 months. Okay, great. I need $3,000 in 6 months for something that's really meaningful to me, trip with my best friend. So we're going to break it down and say, all right, looks like you need to make another $500 a month after taxes and expenses. And then you're going to have that money saved. So then we get to get practical. Okay, how do you make another $500 a month? Is it seeing 5 more clients? Might be one option, right? Is it having a group project that you do? Is it getting a job somewhere where you can get $500 a month? There's actually lots of different creative. Is it babysitting? Is it selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace? Is it digging around in the savings bonds that you got at your bat mitzvah? There's different ways we can start to figure out where that money might be when we start to break it down. And I think it is also useful to recall that when you work for yourself, if you have a savings goal, you need to be able to earn more because we're going to be paying taxes on things like that. Of course, we don't want to forget. But there's something that's also really gorgeous and life affirming about saying, there's a thing, I really want to be able to do it. I can figure out how to get there. And what I love in particular with people who are trying to set up a time-bound savings goal is to say, what if you just made some tweaks to how you're earning and what you're doing so the extra $500 a month is ongoing? And so first you've got this goal about saving for this trip with your best friend. But afterwards, what might it look like if that $500 a month went into something else that you need or want? Saving for an emergency fund, getting your car's brakes fixed, adopting a dog with your partner. Fill in the blank, y'all. The thing about life is that there's endless things we could resource. There's not endless resources to resource them with, of course. So we're always getting to be in a place of discernment and and prioritization, right? What's most important right now? What's possible right now? I also want to talk about giving away and sharing money, which I think is a very important values-based approach to resources. And it's beautiful and I love it. And I'm not about to sit here and be like, don't do it. You should totally fucking do it. If giving money and sharing resources is part of your value system, do that. Live into your values in that way. And I just want to say, if you're a person who cares about that, when you have a little more money, you can do even more of it. Money isn't actually a toxic thing. It could let you do more of something that's already important to you. I always want to shout out the very beautiful working class interdependence value of sharing what we have, even when the pot feels limited. I feel like I get a lot of this question, which is, who am I if I have enough money? I know who I am if I'm struggling. I know who I am if I'm commiserating. I know who I am if I'm passing that 20, $30 around to the GoFundMe. God us bless that 20, $30. We all keep moving around for real. But am I different if I'm not struggling with this piece? The answer, of course, is only if you want to be different. We can change regardless of how much money we have or don't have, right? But sometimes there's this inherent assumption that having different resources over the course of our life changes who we are. Moving out of a place of scarcity totally is scary. It's the difference between an identity shift and a relationship with our identity. We don't have to change when we have more money, but we feel like we might be somebody else. My relationship with my identity. That's real. Something else people find really useful, I know I've found this really helpful, is that money from different sources has different jobs. So maybe my money from my day job is saving for travel and going into my retirement and paying for my other treats or whatnot. And then that's my regular recurring, I know what this money is money. And then money that kind of comes in erratically. I do some consulting, I sell something on Facebook Marketplace, I do a random art show, then maybe that goes to a different goal, right? Something that's more long-term or special. It can be nice to be like, ooh, I got all the money for my motorcycle project from doing theater. This rules. Like we're allowed to have positive feelings about the energy of money. And it can actually sometimes be really cool to create that positive story about where you got the money for something. But you don't have to have some gorgeous positive story to be allowed to save money and have money, right? Just to be clear. Sometimes we just have to work a job because we need income to survive in America and healthcare, and that's okay. When we're thinking about things like retirement money, which I know retirement, LOL, America, the environment, I know. And I think of putting money to retirement. My friend Gail has this amazing way of talking about it where she says, you're betting on the shadow future. What does she mean by that? When I'm putting money into retirement, I don't really want the capitalist system of AI overlords to continue to make money. I don't. And if that whole system crumbles and all of my stocks and money goes away, I'm actually happy because that terrible system has fallen apart. But if that system doesn't crumble, I'm betting on the shadow future where these triflers still keep making money. And then in 30 years, when I'm even somehow more gray, I have some money and I can spread it to my friends and family and community, right? And so I'm betting on the shadow future. I'm happy with either outcome. This is what I think about when it comes to putting money towards retirement. So if I, especially when we're younger in life, 20s, 30s, even 40s, retirement money has a long time to do its thing. It's really worthwhile to put even a little bit of money towards it. And if you're somebody who has a job that offers a match to your retirement, please contribute to meet the match because you're doubling your money. It's really hard to double your money. This lets you do it. Scarcity shows up in at least two ways, probably more. One is real reality scarcity, not having enough money to have the things you need, and knowing what that looks like, feels like, embodying that. Scarcity can be this really real lived experience that we can be tactical and practical about. And we can say, to meet my basic requirements, hypothetical, I need $5,000 a month to pay my mortgage, to get my kids in daycare, to pay for all the stuff. This is just what life costs right now. So if I have less than that, I'm operating in practical scarcity. And then we can make some plans around that, right? Create runway to go from one job to another to make sure that those practical needs are met. I think about that as a teeter-totter when people want to transition from careers. Sometimes we have this short period where we're actually working a little bit too much because we're trying to make the teeter-totter move. I'm still bringing in the money from my old job. I'm trying to bring up the income from the other job. Or I'm saving 6 months of my costs so that I can hit the ground running and start making money with a new project or career while still not being in practical scarcity, not able to pay my mortgage. And then there's projected scarcity, or the scarcity that we are trained to be afraid of in American society, whether that's scarcity for ourselves or we look at other people, we read stories about people in scarcity and we're like, oh my God, I don't want that. And I think those two kind of smash up against each other, right? If you've experienced scarcity or you're looking at something practical, like stopping bringing in your income, that is very real. You want to be able to have a place to live, have food. Addressing that isn't mindset. It's realistic and strategic. But then there's also this totally fear-mongering thing that happens that's in America, you don't want to be poor. Look what we do to our poor people. And any of us who've ever been poor, it fucking sucks. But that's the fear factor piece. So I think differentiating the two can be really helpful. Which scarcity am I like thinking about right now? Is it actually me being wise and discerning and making sure that I'm not going to enter into a scarce environment? Or is it me listening to these stories about how if I don't have a corporate job, everything's going to fall apart? There's tons of self-employed people across the US, right? In creative and non-creative fields. If any of us are people who figured out how to have some reliable, decent chunk of time in our lives where we can do a thing that we love, that's the life hack unlocked, right? How do I actually save money? The second I get it, I just spend it. There's two things. Number one, many of us have a habitual relationship to where our money is. What do I mean by that? If my money's in Venmo, I'm treating it a certain kind of way. If my money's in my checking account, I'm treating it a certain kind of way. Oh, look, how much money's in my checking account? Great, I have money. I'll spend it. So sometimes we have to get ahead of ourselves and our habits and our norms and put the money somewhere else that we have a habitual not spending relationship to. My paycheck hits or my client pays me, and I move a certain amount of money to savings, out of sight, out of mind. I'm not like, oh, yay, I have this, right? I put it somewhere else where my relationship to it is different. I think that's when we do have a little extra income, that's the hack, right? How do I save money? I just put it where I cannot be tempted to get myself a little treat, right? Or to realize I've had enough little treats for the month based on what I'm trying to do with my money. The asterisk here is that sometimes if we're operating in a kind of income gap, like we don't have enough income to cover our basic needs, then we're going to find ourselves transferring money back out of those savings with frequency, right? And if that's what's happening, then that's probably an indicator that there's not quite enough income to cover basics, right? Double asterisk if what you're doing is transferring money out because you're doing late night Instagram purchasing. That might be another flag. But then we can get ahead of ourselves as well, right? Like, where am I spending money? What time? At one point, I noticed I was like, man, when I'm tired, like after 11 p.m., if I'm just beep beeping on my phone, I need to just not let myself buy things because I will just, some other critter takes over my brain. And I'm like, it's okay to buy random things on Instagram. What happened here? This is not who I am. Right. So sometimes we have to understand ourselves and our habits so we can get around what we're doing. You can afford anything, but you can't afford everything, right? One rainbow highlighter is never going to be the thing that breaks the bank, right? One gold glitter liquid eyeliner is never going to be the thing. It's the amalgamation of the habits around them, right? So I'm a big fan of, I never shame myself or anyone else for any specific thing. The question is always, do my habits reflect the outcomes I'm trying to get? That's it. And sometimes when we get joy from spending money, it can be helpful to give ourselves a little special no guilt spending account, separate checking account, or a separate Venmo or something, just some other place where the money is. Or sometimes dedicate one credit card to it if you are good with your credit cards and pay them off and won't forget about it. And you can set yourself a number. I have $150 a month to spend on whatever that number is for you. It can help you scratch the itch. Ooh, screenshot buying. We've got some hacks in the chat. Yeah, when I open my phone and there's like a checkout screen on it, and I'm like, thank God I didn't do that. How many press-on nails does one femme need? I ask myself. The funny thing with money is that there's no absolutes, right? I can't say to any of you, everyone needs $300 in fun money a month because everybody's income is so different. Everyone's needs are so different. Our access needs, our wellness needs, it's all different for all of us. But what we're always looking at is the proportion of what's happening. Okay, I want to answer this question that Pippi called out. Does it make sense to do higher paying contract work that is not benefit earning or get a 9 to 5 that gives me health insurance with less opportunity to grow income? My hot take is a 9 to 5 that you can slightly underwork is the absolute life hack. Because research shows that most of us peter out our high level executive work after about depending on who you are, 4 to 6 hours a day. Right? There's just only so much high level brain work that you can do. So when we're doing a day job, we're often doing 5 to 6 hours of work, and then there's the wraparound work. I gotta check my Slack, I gotta check my email, I gotta walk here, I gotta get to that meeting, et cetera, et cetera. Versus consulting, we really do need to be productive for the hours that we're billing. And so I like to think of a consulting full day as 5, maybe 6 hours. And so not only do I need to be able to bill my full day rate in 5, 6 hours, but I need to be able to add somewhere between 30, 40, maybe 50% to add on healthcare, retirement, insurance, things that the job would pay for me that consulting needs to pay for me otherwise, right? This isn't to say that consulting doesn't work. There's absolutely consulting gigs that I've certainly had where if I'm able to make a rate that is 150 to 300 for consulting, I'm actually am able to meet the rate that I would be getting it working at a day job. But the rate we need for consulting is often a lot higher than you think because you're not doing 8 hours in a day. And I need to fill in my healthcare, and I need to fill in my retirement, and my PTO, and my extra taxes, and right. So if I was working for somebody else expecting to make $50 an hour, I would want to be consulting at 100. And no office coffee machine. I have to buy my own freaking Keurig. For some of us, this is great. I've embraced the opportunity to buy my own Keurig. I'm kind of like that, but it's also very legitimate to say, oh, wow, great way to think about it. At the end of the day, what if I had my office job and then I was able to have an extra hour or two of brain space for my creative thing every day? And so, again, this is going to be about your priorities. Are you excited about entrepreneurship? Some of us think it's pretty fun and cool and enjoy that. In that case, figuring out the path towards that higher earning contract work might be the way for you, right? And there's no shade on that. If you enjoy it, it's a really fun life. If you don't enjoy it, it's not as fun.